Hello, my name is Olu Osha. I enjoy talking about American presidents. I've been talking about the presidency of Lyndon B. Johnson, our 36th president. Now I'm going to talk about the conspiracies that came up following the assassination of John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963, which of course meant that Lyndon Johnson succeeded him as president. Now, there have been many conspiracies, including that the government, the CIA, the FBI, the Secret Service, they conspired and killed President Kennedy. Let me start off by just saying that if such a conspiracy occurred, uh, it would mean a coup. That was a coup, and that would be treason, right? I'm a federal government employee. I'm currently not working in my position, but as of May 16, 2023, I was a federal government employee. Uh, prior to being swatted. I've talked about how I've been swatted, and subsequently there's been an abusive process with subornation of perjury and fraud on the courts. So I'm a federal government employee. What happens is that you swear an oath to the U.S. Constitution, and of course the president is the number one person in the U.S. Constitution. Anybody who conspires or even assassinates the president or does anything, or that would be treason, and you'd be violating your oath of office. Something I can tell you is that 97% of people who take that oath very seriously. They're very passionate about the government, especially if you're working in a top secret position, very sensitive position. People working with the government who can get close to him, people working with the president of the United States who can get close to him, they have to be cleared, and so they all passionate about the oath they've taken, right? So they're above board, right? But of course, nothing is 100%, right? So that would be someone slipped through. But again, back to the notion that if somebody, a federal employee, anybody, federal government official, conspired and killed the president, that would have been an act of treason, right? That would have been an act of treason that occurred, and of course that can be punishable by death. It's ruination. That there are many reasons that did not occur, right? And I'll get into that. But first of all, the notion that we can create something, that the government can create something, a system or a unit within the government, that's the CIA or the FBI, that can eventually kill its leader, because the president is a leader of any unit, any organization, is still the number one person. And so that would be a Frankensteinian system, right? We would have a Frankensteinian system, like Frankenstein's monster. I read the book Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and it's about this guy Frankenstein. The monster is not actually Frankenstein; it's the scientist, who created the monster. But that monster, now started thinking on its own. It became so powerful, and it started killing people, started doing things on its own, and he wanted to actually kill his master, his creator. And of course, the creator Frankenstein had just one mission in life: to kill the monster, or else it would end up killing the creator. So we don't have such a system. Americans, we don't have that much hubris built into our system, right? You see, our system, our constitution is so flexible. It's very flexible. We have all these checks and balances. We have all this cautious mechanisms built into the system. So we wouldn't, that would be a Frankensteinian system, and the only way to address it, like if we had a CIA or an FBI unit within them that had so much hubris and became so unaccountable that they could conspire and kill the president, the only thing that could happen, right, the outcome of that would, the solution would be to destroy that system. The CIA is still there, the FBI is still there. That did not happen, right? And I'm going to get into details later on why that did not happen. Now, there were all sorts of investigations. There are other things that could have happened. Now, Lee Harvey Oswald is a person who was a shooter. When I was a kid in Nigeria, I actually read, so there was a Warren Commission that was set up, right? So I read a book that was discussing the Warren Commission and the possibilities of some kind of conspiracy, and all the book ended up doing was debunking, any theory, right? And it still didn't give you, it didn't point the finger at any particular person, So yes, was there a cover-up? There was a cover-up. There have been commissions after that. There's the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which had a report in 1979, and which said, well, the Warren Commission covered things up, right? That there was a cover-up, but again, they couldn't precisely say who it was, who conspired. In fact, they did indicate that they believed there was a conspiracy to assassinate the president, that the assassination was part of a conspiracy. And Lee Harvey Oswald, the man who shot Kennedy on November 22nd, was killed on November 24th in front of, in public, as it was having some kind of press meeting or whatever. He had been arraigned, and he was claiming he was the one who killed the president, and he was saying he was a patsy. He was claiming that he was a patsy, but he was assassinated. So, which gives credence. It raises suspicion that, okay, he was being silenced, and the man who killed him, his name was Jack Rubinstein, also Jack Ruby. He was a man who was terminally ill. He had cancer, so he died in prison. He had cancer, so it created all sorts of suspicions, innuendo that, okay, hey, there was some kind of conspiracy going on, and the backers of Lee Harvey Oswald, they were silencing him. So in any event, like I said, you can rule out the FBI, the CIA, because again, I don't think our system has that sort of hubris that we would create a Frankenstein monster, or a sorcerer's apprentice, and that would end up attacking its creator. The only solution, if we found out we had that on our hands, the government would have destroyed, right, that monster. They would have eliminated it, right? So the CIA is still there, still does what it does. The FBI is still there. They weren't destroyed. So that you can rule that out, right? If there was any person, any group of persons within the FBI that got into a conspiracy and arrangement and participated with Lee Harvey Oswald to get the president killed, you can bet that they'd be dead, right? Not from natural causes, but the system would have killed them off, right? If that were discovered, but there'll be people in the government that would know that, okay, hey, we have this Frankenstein's monster. It was one of our own that killed the president. They would know, and we'd know that we have something. Our system doesn't work. One of the first things that Lyndon Johnson did when he assumed the presidency, he gave a press conference, a televised speech in which he reassured Americans that our system works, right? Our system works. And so it wasn't our system. I'm going to do a subsequent video. I don't want to keep this long and talk about, things that Kennedy was doing, and it seemed like it may have been the blowback from his actions. He had declassified information, revealed that he was involved in the government's, the CIA's attempts to assassinate Fidel Castro, right? And so the House Select Committee on Assassinations in 1979, they ruled out the Soviet government, they ruled out the Cuban government. That's concerning culprits who conspired to assassinate the president. They ruled out the Soviet government, ruled out the Cuban government, right? That's Castro's government. They ruled out the FBI, the CIA, and the Secret Service. Basically, they're ruling out everybody, but they did not rule out anti-Castro, Cubans who wanted Fidel Castro out of office, right? They didn't rule out the mafia, So there are these things that they've been, these claims about the mafia. Now, something that I'm not into organized crime. I don't pay that much attention. I read Godfather when I was a kid, and Mario Puzo did a great job. And I've lived in Italy, and my friends told me a lot about the mafia, my roommates. And something they told me about the mafia is like, look, they don't disclose themselves. They don't disclose themselves. They're very intelligent. They're very subtle, right? Killing the president of the United States. They don't draw attention, right? They kill somebody nobody cares about. That's not going to come back. There's not going to be a blowback. They're not going to come back and start hunting them. And they don't want to destroy their organization, right? So killing the president of the United States is not something that the mafia is going to do, right? They want to make money. They don't get involved, in things that vendettas or whatever, endeavors, bloody actions that are just too costly. If you remember in The Godfather, what was his name? Was it Soloso or whatever? He wanted to get the help of the Godfather, and the Godfather, refused. He talked about, killings, how costly that was, right? That he's a businessman. He doesn't really want to kill. They don't kill unless they have to. And killing the president of the United States would actually destroy the organization. It would destroy the mafia. It doesn't make sense. So it wasn't the mafia. Now, it was revealed that the CIA had actually enlisted the help of the mafia to try and get Castro killed. Bobby Kennedy and the late John F. Kennedy had both, they'd approved the CIA enlisting the help of the mafia to get Fidel Castro killed. Because what happened was, so the mafia had interest, casinos in Cuba, but when Castro took over, the communists, Castro, when he took over, they basically nationalized their businesses, put the mafia out of business, and so they lost money, and so they wanted to replace the government. The CIA was already was already engaging in such activities. The CIA, by the way, they conduct themselves under the what's called plausible deniability, right? Plausible deniability. So they have no paper trail. They're going to deny whatever happens anyway. They don't leave any evidence that they were involved. But unfortunately, in this regard, it was discovered that in fact they had tried to a regime change in Cuba with the Bay of Pigs, which of course failed, and President Kennedy had authorized, it seems maybe rather hurriedly, authorized the Bay of Pigs, which failed. And it was a cocktail of a conspiracy of mafia people in the mafia and some anti-Castro Cubans. It failed, and the indications that it was a blowback. Now, would Fidel Castro on his own simply go and try and have President Kennedy killed? No. The way the communist governments work, the idea is to eliminate individual states and unite all communist states as one entity, dictatorship of the proletariat. So if Fidel Castro, the Cuban government, the communist government were doing something, they would have the full backing of the Soviet government, right? And America was engaged in a Cold War with the Soviet government. So what likely occurred was that indeed there was a blowback, some kind of retribution, a retaliation, because Lee Harvey Oswald was a disgraced court-martialed Marine, U.S. Marine, who at some point he had renounced his U.S. citizenship, went to live in Soviet Union, and then returned, married to a Russian wife. There's a lot going on, and it turns out that it was discovered, in later declassified, further investigations, that the CIA had actually been surveilling Lee Harvey Oswald prior to that death, and they had actually had contact with him at some point, much earlier on. And so those are things that raise suspicions. In terms of Lyndon Johnson, like I said, it would have to have been a coup, right? And so if we have such a system where we're creating that the presidents, people in governments are easily executed, that the head of states, that they can easily execute a coup against the head of state. We can change our own government. The thing is, that would be an authoritarian, despotic, right, oligarchic sort of system. And such systems, they do away with the capricious popular voting system. They just do away with the vote, because it would just put too much risk, too much uncertainty in the system. We'd no longer be able to control the system. So we'd be an outright dictatorship. That has not occurred since that time. It's been over 60 years, right? So and when I listened to a conversation, the media conversation between LBJ, President Lyndon Johnson, and J. Edgar Hoover, who was the head of the FBI at the time. And you could see the questions that LBJ asked J. Edgar Hoover. He was showing concern, right? He asked if he had been shot at. That there were 3 shots, and he asked if there were any shots fired at him. He was concerned. He seemed paranoid, concerned about his own safety. That was he under threat? That was not the. Those are not the questions, right? Absent artifice, the guile, or whatever. Those are not the sort of questions that a man who's led or been a part of the biggest conspiracy ever, to take out a U.S. president, and he should be triumphant because he's now president. Those are not the questions. Those are not the indications, that signs he shows, right? He looked like he was scared, and in fact, it was real, because he did suffer an angina. In fact, later investigations have called it a silent heart attack. That's Lyndon Johnson had a silent heart attack as soon after JFK had been assassinated. He was rushed to the hospital, right? And when you see that famous photo of him being sworn in on Air Force One with Jackie Kennedy right next to him, he didn't look like a triumphant man. He looked scared. He looked like a mouse. He looked nervous, right? He didn't look like he knew what, like he'd executed something. He didn't look like a mastermind of anything. I'll do a subsequent video. I want to keep these things short because and I'll just talk more in detail. My name is Olu Osha. I like talking about American presidents, and I draw attention to color of law violations, pivoting on subordination of perjury and fraud on the court, violating my constitutional, civil, and human rights. I was a victim of a swatting from Montgomery County Police on May 16, 2023. There's been an abusive process with the court and state attorney trying to cover up and protect rogue cops and rogue actions, police brutality inflicted against me by Montgomery County Police Department in Montgomery County, Maryland. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.